Welcome students to this tutorial video over short answer questions, a method and procedure. First of all, what are short answer questions? They're questions which are open-ended and require a multi-sentence response which answers the question and supports the answer with reasoning. These are questions you've seen before. Your freshman year, you were trained heavily in how to respond to these because you saw them on last year's STAR, and you will see them again on this year's STAR. They're a very popular assessment tool. It's an effective way to measure a student's comprehension of a topic or a text, and it's really quick for an instructor to read and score. SAQs are seen everywhere. In addition to seeing them on the STAR exam, many college exams are built on short answer questions. I know I took a lot of short answer exams in college. What this tutorial video is going to do, we're going to cover two things: proper responses to short answer questions, and then some best practices for approaching short answer questions. So how should you respond to an SAQ, or short answer question? Responding to a short answer question requires that you compose a short argument, and we've studied the various parts of an argument. You need a claim, which you've been introduced to as an assertion, which directly and precisely responds to the question, and then you need support, which backs up your claim. The assertion, evidence, commentary, or AEC formula that you were taught as freshmen can work for this, but be careful you don't mistake a formula for an actual method. Simply having an assertion, some evidence, and commentary in your response doesn't necessarily make it a good argument or a good response. Your ideas still have to make sense. More important than any formula you use is the content of your response. Where so many students fail on short answer responses is in the logical disconnect between the assertion and the text evidence that's provided. Many teachers will say that the student doesn't explain the evidence enough in their commentary, or that the evidence doesn't clearly support the assertion. But if a short argument is conceptualized properly, this shouldn't happen, because bad logic is actually pretty easy to spot. My first advice to you then is this: stop thinking about evidence and commentary as two separate entities. Instead, think of them as one thing: support for your claim or assertion, whatever you want to call it. Effective support features elements like appropriate evidence, clear explanation, and convincing reasoning. These elements shouldn't, however, be forced into separate statements. They should instead all work together and be almost indistinguishable from one another. So if you ever have trouble pointing to your evidence and then pointing to your commentary because it all just kind of mashes together, that's actually good. That means you're providing logical, sophisticated support. Let's take a look at a sample short answer question, something similar to what you'd see on the STAR. Of course, naturally on the STAR you'd have a passage to read. In my sample question here, I'm just going to use a passage or a text that we've already read as a class. STAR will never ask you about texts that do not appear on the actual test. So let's say I had a question like this: in Heart of Darkness, how is Kurtz's character portrayed? Support your answer with evidence from the text. It's a very general question, not a terribly complicated question. They're designed to be simple and open-ended because they want to test for basic reading comprehension. So I might start, if I were trained in that AEC format that you learned as freshman, I might write something like this, my three-sentence response. Mr. Kurtz is portrayed as someone who loses his sense of morality and becomes savage. Marlowe learns that Kurtz set himself up as the all-powerful leader of a tribe of natives and, quote, raided the country on page 125, keeping his power by beheading any rebels and displaying their heads on fence posts as warnings on page 128 through 129. At some point during Kurtz's time in the Congo, he becomes tyrannical and savage. This is a decent response. It would score a 2. It's by no means elegant. It still leaves some gaps in logic. And it's a great example of showing how when you force yourself to write one sentence for an assertion, one sentence for evidence, one sentence for commentary, how it really restricts how you can argue clearly and argue with any sort of convincing reasoning. If, however, I was to do something like this, departing from that natural AEC style, you can see already that I'm starting to fill in some of the gaps in logic. The area you can see in red, is something I've added. It's an additional sort of follow-up statement that's not really part of, it's kind of partly explaining my claim, and it's also partly prepping my evidence. It really can't be pinned to any one part. Let's hear how this reads. Mr. Kurtz is portrayed as someone who loses his sense of morality and becomes savage. Marlowe's encounters in parts 1 and 2 reveal that Kurtz originally wanted to help the natives by bringing them the benefits of European civilization, but at some point, living outside civilization turns him away from these ideals. Marlowe learns that Kurtz set himself up, and then the rest of it's the same. This explanation is basically just me front-loading the reasoning behind my claim in my own words. My claim, thus, is better supported, so my response, the rest of my response, is just more reasonable. By adding this one sentence of explanation, I've also actually uncovered an additional need for my short answer response. Since my assertion or claim states that he loses this sense of morality, I also apparently need to prove that he had it to begin with. And I really, if I had just stuck to one sentence of evidence, I probably would have never even noticed that. So let's see what it would look like if I added in an additional evidence statement to support what I just talked about, how he originally possessed morality. So here's a new edit. Mr. Kurtz is portrayed as someone who loses his sense of morality and becomes savage. Marlowe's encounters in chapters 1 and 2 reveal that Kurtz originally wanted to help the natives by bringing them the benefits of European civilization, but at some point, living outside civilization turns him away from these ideals. Marlowe overhears the Central Station manager mocking Kurt's belief that, quote, each station should be like a beacon on the road towards better things, a center for humanizing, improving, instructing. That's from page 93. And the rest of my response continues with the rest of my original text evidence. Now I have text evidence to support all of my observations, both the fact that he possessed at one time a sense of morality and then later on did not. This response is better by all accounts, but if you read it straight through, it still doesn't flow very logically. If you look after the part that I've added there, I just jump right in. In the final chapter, Marlowe learns that Kurtz set himself up as the all-powerful leader of a tribe of natives, and I don't really have a whole lot of explanation after that. And it's because I'm still forcing myself to segregate my evidence from my commentary. You can see that here. I've got a claim, a statement of general evidence, two statements of specific evidence, and then one little sentence at the end that works as my commentary. Let's see what happens, though, if I kind of break from that formula and just kind of mix them up and just create a logical, flowing argument. Because honestly, all these things should be just seamlessly intertwined. Mr. Kurtz is portrayed as someone who loses his sense of morality and becomes savage. Marlowe's encounters in chapters 1 and 2 reveal that Kurtz originally wanted to help the natives by bringing them the benefits of European civilization. The station manager relates Kurtz's belief that the company outposts should each, quote, be like a beacon on the road towards better things, a center for humanizing, improving, instructing. However, at some point, living outside civilization turns Kurtz away from these ideals, as he becomes domineering and even violent. Marlowe learns in chapter 3 that Kurtz eventually sets himself up as the all-powerful leader of a tribe of natives and, quote, raided the country, keeping his power by beheading any rebels and displaying their heads on fence posts as warnings. At some point during Kurtz's time in the Congo, he becomes tyrannical and savage. This flows much more fluidly. But now, my last problem remains that final sentence. The final sentence seems purposeless, perfunctory. And remember, good writing is purposeful writing. So I can't just remove it. If I remove it, my whole paragraph kind of lacks completeness. It lacks closure. So let's rework that final statement. I'm going to replace it with a sentence which wraps up my ideas and ties everything back into my central claim, which is that he's lost morality and becomes savage. So something like this. My original paragraph is not changed, but I can just end it with something like this. Now tyrannical and savage, since I've addressed his tyrannical nature by fact that he's setting himself up as leader, and the savage nature, his violence. Kurtz has metaphorically lost his way in the Congo. There we go. That word lost. I've purposefully used lost because my assertion uses the word loses, and I want to tie it very directly back into my initial assertion. So Kurtz has metaphorically lost his way in the Congo and is no longer the virtuous man others thought him to be. Okay. Again, virtuous individuals are moral people, so it's just a sort of different way of saying basically the same thing, tying it back together. This response, highly effective. This would score a 3 undoubtedly on the exam. The position argued is sophisticated. The support is strong. There's plenty of evidence. The evidence is fully explained. The reasoning is convincing. The only problem is that it's a little long. This version is 159 words. I can take care of that, though. Go through, do some minor editing. With minimal editing, I can get this down to 141 words. That saves me a whole line to write on. And remember, you only get 10 lines for a short answer on STAR. The most effective responses that have been published, the responses that score 3s, are usually between 120 and 150 words. So if you tend to write big, if you tend to write only 7 or 8 words per line, you really need to write smaller and try to get in 13, 14, 15 words per line. All right, next up, how should you approach a short answer question? This is different from just how you should write it. This is how you should conceptualize a short answer question from the time you first read it. Each short answer question gives you a full page of scratch paper. It's really, Texas has no problem wasting a lot of blank space on their tests and wasting a lot of trees to give you that blank space. And if you don't use this scratch paper, you are really wasting an opportunity. Use this space for planning, outlining, and drafting your response, just like you would an essay. When you first encounter a short answer question, I highly suggest that you try working backwards. Don't start thinking of your assertion or claim immediately. Start thinking of support first. Think about what the question is asking you and write some observations of key details that you just remember from the text, maybe even before you go back to the text. Then you can, once you have those general observations down, find some specific passages which work together to kind of help you answer the question. Read those passages together, and then you can kind of figure out exactly what your answer to the question is, which is going to turn into your claim or assertion. This backwards method helps for a few reasons. You are beginning with something concrete, something you can point to, which helps you avoid blocks and spinning your wheels. And also, by making simple observations and gathering evidence first, you can then draw more defendable conclusions, which makes for more supportable claims. And lastly, composing a claim is all about word choice. All short answer questions are asking you to do is make some judgment about something in the text, and what you call that thing is really important to how you support it later on. I just want to take you quickly through how I might approach this prompt. Like beneath it in the scratch paper, I might start with stuff like this, just jotting down some ideas about how Kurtz is misunderstood. He has a reputation within the company. He's worshipped by these people. Marlowe and others see him for what he is. He's lost his way. He's gone from being idealistic to being violent and practical, that sort of thing. So here I've made some simple observations about Kurtz's character. I've made sure to examine multiple aspects of his character so I don't become fixated on any one quality. Next, I can go find some specific passages to cite which can help me hone my answer. There are some passages that kind of reveal Kurtz's character and how he's portrayed. On your test, of course, you can mark these passages rather than write them all out on scratch paper, but it's important to examine them together as a group, because together these passages are painting a picture of Mr. Kurtz. I need to read them together one after the other so that my picture comes into focus. Then I can craft my claim. Let's see, Mr. Kurtz is portrayed as a monster. That's true, but oversimplified. Mr. Kurtz is portrayed as a lost soul. That's more complex, but it's still a bit vague. Lost soul is open to interpretation. Mr. Kurtz is portrayed as someone who gave up on society. That's almost true. And then lastly, I can arrive on my actual claim that I showed you in